Hi everyone, it's Rose from the LaGrange Park Library, and I'm going to teach you how to make brownies today in this installment of Kids Kitchen. So, first thing that you want to do is you want to read your recipe all the way through. I usually read it a few times because sometimes I don't understand it right away. So that way you know everything that you need and you can have it out like I do right now. And that way you know all of the steps. So this is a pretty simple recipe. The great thing about the internet is there are so many recipes that you can just find online right now. So that's where I found this one, and I'll put a link to it down below. And this one is a little bit different than other brownie recipes. I've made brownies before, but I really liked that this one had brown sugar in it. And melted butter. So a lot of times brownies have vegetable oil instead. So I'm very interested to see how the melted butter turns out. So the first part of the recipe is to preheat your oven to 300 degrees. So our oven is ready. And now this recipe says to use butter to grease your pan. You can either use butter, you can use pan spray, or what I did is because if you watch the video that's in this, they do use parchment paper instead. So I'm gonna try that because I've never done that before with brownies. So I'm gonna see how the parchment paper does, and then hopefully it should be easy just to lift it right out when it's ready. So that's ready to go. And then we need to get a bowl. And the other thing about this recipe is it says to use a stand mixer, and I'm not a fan of those. Ours is really heavy, it's hard to get out, and I always feel like it doesn't pick up everything that's in the bottom. So you can't always substitute a hand mixer for a stand mixer, but I'm gonna try it today and see, because I do have a whisk attachment on my hand mixer. So we'll see how it goes. It's an experiment. So the first thing, and this is very tangled, let me fix this. The first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna beat the eggs. So one thing about my hand mixer is it goes really fast for a hand mixer, even the lowest setting. So just have to be really careful, especially when you're working with eggs. You don't want to overwork them. So let's get started. So I'm going to put my eggs in here. You always want to crack your eggs in a separate bowl, not the bowl that you're going to put all your ingredients in. That way, if you get any shells in there, your thing isn't ruined. So let's try this and see how it goes. I've never used this whisk attachment before, so. All right, so this recipe says that you want to beat the eggs at medium speed until they're fluffy and light yellow. So we can see they're fluffier. I'll show you. The thing about, see, they're a little fluffy, not as dark yellow as when you first started. The thing about using the hand mixer is that your arm gets tired. So just keep that in mind. All right, so now we're gonna add the sugars, and what it asks us to do is to sift the sugar. So now there's two different ways that you can sift, at least that I have. I'm sure there's many more ways, but I have a sifter, which is very nice. When using brown sugar, when a recipe calls for brown sugar, you want to make sure it's packed down, because unlike white sugar, which is just really easy to fill up a cup with, the brown sugar it sticks together a little bit more. So we're going to sift that in the sifter, and then I'll show you the other way. Anything's coming out. Let's try this one. So this is another way to sift. I'm using just like a really fine strainer, colander, and this is working a little better for the brown sugar than the sifter because it doesn't want to go all the way through. So we're just pressing it through, and I even need to just kind of get that off the bottom there. And I think the reason that you want to try to sift the brown sugar is sometimes the clumps can gather in the brown sugar and then they're just kind of hardened together. So now we're gonna add our other sugar. This one you'll see sifts a lot easier. Just gonna get it all over. I'll show you how it sifts through the other one. So this goes through. So you see that's a lot easier than that brown sugar. I'm gonna do this to kind of get everything out of there. Just check the inside. Make sure it's all in there. All right. And then we add everything else. So after the sugars, we're gonna add our 8 ounces of melted butter. I've melted that. When you're melting butter, I usually do it in the microwave, and you just need to really keep an eye on it and do a few seconds at a time. And then we're gonna add our cocoa, also sifted. This is 1.25 cups of cocoa powder. I like to use dark ones, so I've got, this is kind of like a fancier one, and then also I was almost out of that, so we used a little bit of the Hershey's Special Dark. We'll sift that in. One thing you want to be careful about with cocoa powder is that you kind of get that cocoa dust coming up, and if you inhale that, it makes you cough a little. Oh, and if I forgot to mention, please wash your hands before you start cooking. I'm sure you hear that a lot now, wash your hands, but it is very important. Okay, and now we're gonna add some vanilla extract, 2 teaspoons worth. And 1/2 cup of flour. So for the flour, that's also going to go through the sifter. I think we'll use the other one this time just to show you. This, when you are measuring flour, you want to make sure to scrape the top. So I just use a butter knife. There is a tool for that, but that way you're not getting more than you need. And sift it through here. Again, the sifting breaks up any of those big clumps. So sometimes if it's not going all the way through, you can just use your hand to push it down. And we're good. We are going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt, kosher salt. Okay. Also, the other thing I forgot to mention, when you're measuring butter, it's very helpful that on the side of the butter, it tells you. So we used 8 ounces, that's 2 sticks of butter. All right, let's mix it together and see what happens. So another tool that's very helpful to have when you are baking is a rubber spatula. This way you can scrape anything off of the sides that is not wanting to go in the batter. So we'll scrape down those sides, give it one more mix, and then we should be ready to go. So our batter is ready. It's a little on the thick side, so we'll see how that turns out. I don't know if maybe I overdid the eggs a little, but now we're gonna pour it into our pan. This is the tricky part, is this parchment paper keeps wanting to pop up. We will do our best to make sure that we get it in there. So let's see how it goes. So just don't want to worry about getting it in there, and then you can even it out once everything's out of the bowl. All right, so that is, okay, so that's everything. So I'm going to use the spatula to spread out the brownies. So we get all the way to the edge. And not too high on one side and too low on another. So you want to even it out. Very good. Okay, so it is a little hard with the parchment to get it to kind of stick to the corner. So we'll see how it comes out. It might be a little funky on the edges. But like I said, you can always just grease your pan so it doesn't stick. Okay. Feels pretty even. So let's see. Test it out. You can always do this to even it out and shake it out a little. This helps get some of the air bubbles out. And we'll see how it goes. All right, let's put it in the oven. Okay, so our brownies have been in the oven for 45 minutes, so we're gonna take them out and see how they're doing. So first, I'm going to get out a cooling rack. Alright, so what you wanna do is you wanna test them first. So take a toothpick, stick it in the middle, and if it comes out clean, that means it's ready. So this one did not come out clean. So I'm gonna pop it back in for another 5 minutes. Once you start baking a lot, you'll get to know your oven. And my oven usually takes longer than what a recipe says. So we'll give it a few more minutes. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes, so let's try this again. And you want to make sure that you test a different spot. You don't want to just stick it in the same spot that you did last time. So, feels a lot better. Yeah, so just a little bit this time. So I'm gonna say that they're done. And it says to remove to a cooling rack. So this recipe doesn't mention whether or not you should take it out of the pan. But as it originally said, you should grease the pan. I'm thinking we should leave it in the pan. We'd be able to take it out with parchment paper, but it's a little soft, so we're gonna leave it in the pan to cool. And it's funny, this recipe says, resist the temptation to cut into them until it's mostly cool. So we'll give it a little while to cool off, and then we'll be back to cut them. All right, so these are pretty much cool. So the nice thing about the parchment paper is I'm just gonna lift them out and set them on my cutting board. And I'm gonna use a serrated edge knife or a bread knife, and we'll see how they are. They're very gooey on the inside. Let's try one. Look at that. Very nice, very dense. That's a good brownie. Enjoy.